It's one of those nights. So you get a stream. I'm not really pushing it either. This is more of going to be a live discussion conversation stream because I want to keep working on this elephant project we've got going. A few of you who are here may not know of it. That's fine. We'll go over the entire thing kind of from the beginning. But first I want to say thank you for joining. I did nothing to announce this whatsoever, so it's nice to have a couple of you here. So let's just fuck it, bounce over. There's this book Lakoff, a guy named Lakoff wrote, and it's called Don't Think of Elephants. At a baseline, the core idea of Don't Think of Elephants is simple. Don't think of elephants when I tell you not to think of elephants. Comes the challenge. Naturally, the challenge will affect. Kind of actually a pretty difficult place to be sort of stuck in. When we have a idea, concept, notable event, news story, anything related to us, one of the great challenges we have is that how it's related to us, the way we hear about it, becomes the way people talk about it. That's it. Once people talk about it, we've got that story. And that's kind of it. It's a big shame. So, in order to start working on this, I happened to come across a story at the same time I was reading Lakoff's book, which I'm a fan of, and I do recommend it. Confused? Philosophy Noir. You're confused. Oh, allow me. One moment. We'll find this thing. I don't want you to be confused. Of all people. Lord, I'd feel terrible. 2 moments. And I'll bring the book up. There we go. I just didn't want to pop in a lot of, in case there was random shit that popped out. Here's the short version. We're going to kind of just zoom in a little bit. George Lakoff wrote, "Don't think of an elephant. Know your values, frame the debate." He's a super lib. On the lefty, more progressive side, granted, but he is a super lib. But it doesn't mean his political analysis isn't fucking solid. The idea of thinking of an elephant works like this. George Lakoff returns to new strategies how to frame today's issues. Called the father of framing by the New York Times, Lakoff explains how framing is about ideas. Ideas that come before policy, ideas that make sense of facts, ideas that are proactive, not reactive. Okay? How to speak to people who harbor elements of both progressive and conservative worldviews, how to counter propaganda and slogans and more. He wrote this big, long book around this whole thing. We live in a space now where very much the way things are spoken of make their way downstream in ways that are really more, I think, cynical than ever and more refined than ever. An example would be what's happening with Zelensky right in front of us. Anyone who saw press conference with Zelensky and Trump knows how it went. There's no one otherwise. However, a lot of people didn't watch it. In fact, I would say the vast majority of Trump voters don't watch. They watch clips they see on X. They watch clips they see on YouTube or on various news shows. They don't watch the entire thing. They don't get the context of the entire thing. The position that we get put in then is responding to the way this is framed, not actually to the story itself. Lakoff's idea is, rather than allowing them to frame this, which puts us in a position of having to defend, in the case of Zelensky's not pulling us into World War III. We've lost. The moment we're at that point, we've lost. That's the end of it. If we're having a discussion of who's pulling who into World War III, none of the rest matters. I hope that makes sense. Once the thing is framed, there. So, how do we, instead of simply, Lakoff's framing is about breaking it down for yourself and maybe how to rework it a bit. How do we instead build a methodology, much more interesting, that allows us to have these conversations sidestep those other conversations. That make more sense, Flaw? In the answer. But we'll find out. Find out in time. A bit more. All right. Let's take the example going with. You're going to be the one I'm going to be talking to you. I'm going to pretend I'm talking to you. We have a story here. This is the story that I decided I wanted to do this practice with and run through it. This is the story of this guy right here. Ohio pastor. Okay. We are going. Actually, just. All right. This was in USA Today. This story. Here and oh, it's pulling the top. Embarrassing. And in we go. Ohio pastor wanted to help. Now he's been found guilty of running a homeless shelter. This is the story as it's been passed on, or as it's been sort of pushed across the board. This is a framing. This is a deliberate framing by a hyper-partisan, right-wing, reactionary, Christian fundamentalist, hyper-constitutionalist, fascist regime. I use a lot of words there. The Heritage Foundation and really kind of everyone around them has a huge number of lawyers and PR firms that have been working on this story and building it out. Because what this story is about is not a man found guilty of a homeless shelter. We'll get to that. This is the headline. Here's the reason it matters. Because the people who picked up on this are lefties across the board too. They did. More Perfect Union, I actually really think is an exceptional outlet. They commented on this. They did content on this. X comments, tweets, whatever you want to call it. They did stuff on this and they have a huge reach. Everyone decided to back this idea of why would you ever have a city that stops a homeless shelter? A judge has ruled that a Northwestern Ohio pastor violated fire codes by running a shelter for those suffering homelessness. Bryan Municipal Court Judge Kent North issued the ruling Tuesday against Pastor Chris Avell, confirming that Dad's Place, a church in Bryan, Ohio, about 65 miles southwest of Toledo, violated fire code. The city of Bryan has consistently emphasized that public safety regulations, including fire codes, must be adhered to regardless of any other circumstances, the mayor said in a news release. He added that Dad's Place can still serve as a church. First Liberty Institute, a nonprofit public interest law firm that's born. The lawyers literally argue in front of the Supreme Court multiple times by cherry picking little stupid cases like this and running them. We have all this sourced in the Miro doc. It's fucking crazy. The nonprofit plans to appeal, and they're going all the way through. Pastor Avell was fined $200 and given a 60-day jail sentence, the nonprofit shared. The judge stayed his decision for 30 days to allow the Avells turning to appeal. And then they did it anyway, because they don't care. Their goal is actually try to get it to the Supreme Court. He said in the news release that pastors in America should not be found guilty of providing shelters for those in need. Now, this is all framing. This is framing. Because now that the story has been told like this, how do you argue against it? Because here is the real story. This is the dominant framing. The real story is actually pretty simple. A nice dumb preacher filled with desperate people who are rejects from the homeless shelter next door that doesn't allow people who are addicts or those with sexual, we'll say sexual assault in their history or sex offenders to stay there because, you know, they have children and families. You have to make choices. Chris Avell has Dad's Place, where he ostensibly has them able to sleep. They don't have beds. No, they have a bedroom apparently in the back. They don't have fire safety equipment. They don't have fire alarms. They don't have fire doors. In fact, they have padlocks on. And having people sleep in droves inside of a random warehouse is illegal because of occupancy and fire code to stop people from burning to death. All of this gets tossed by the wayside. All of this gets tossed by the when we sit and we go, well, he shouldn't have been fined. He was granted the ability to become a homeless shelter over a year ago. Said to do that, you need to make these changes. He agreed he would. He didn't. Then he didn't, and he didn't. And they've done 6 or 7 finings, citations, court hearings, and he's refused to do it for the course of, I think it's 17 or 18 months now. And finally, the judge said, well, we're just going to fine you then. You can't do this. You can't have the new zoning rule and not take care of it. Why does this matter? Well, start diving into this fucking guy. Crazy the back history of all of this. The legal group is part of the Federalist Society Heritage Foundation multi sort of umbrella that does a lot of these sort of hearings. Okay. They find cases. For example, they found a case here in Washington State where I live, where what they do is this guy who's a coach wanted his students and his athletes to pray in the middle of the field before every game in front of everyone with a microphone and over the stadium speaker. And the school went, no, we can't do that. He said, I'm doing it anyway. And they said, dude, don't do that shit. And they disciplined him for it because fuck you. Well, they took that shit to the Supreme Court and they said it was because he just wanted his players to pray. Technically true. Made it all the way through because people were like, why would you stop them from praying? Let them pray. The school offered to allow him to do it in the lockers, not in public, on the field, in the game, all of that. This is how they do these court cases. This is how they chase this stuff down. This is how the Republican regime plays. And this is how they're playing now. With this example, we chased down and we found, well, actually, it's more than just this guy. The guy he's borrowing from, who's a member of another set of churches, who happens to be related to, and we'll get into where money comes from, who happens to be related to a huge sort of development group that does development for churches by converting old buildings, is a really common thing here in America, right? You've driven down the street, you've seen old grocery stores or drugstores or old Kmarts that suddenly are like New Birth Baptist Church or some shit like that. And it's these huge parking lots that are empty every day of the week. It's incredible, but tax-free owned property that got retrofitted into being a church. There's a big business in doing this. This is what Chris Savelle has plugged himself into. Part of this is the fact that he built and helped run SaveYourChurchMoney.com, which is a furniture wholesaler for churches that makes a tidy sum of profit off of these types of rebuildings. So he's working with the actual owners of the building who want to be able to develop places into churches without having to redo fire code. Because got to redo fire code because fire code stops people from dying. All of this to be said. Dad's place and the preacher actually not named in lawsuit. The guy who owns the building. Dad's place and the preacher who are fronted. Fucking crazy story, right? But this is how all of these things go. When you start picking at any of the stuff, you realize all of it is just a huge giant lie. But you have to pick at it. And most people are not going to do that, nor should we expect them to. That's the insane thing. We're not going to expect people to do that. I'm not going to expect people. But it runs into a very special problem. How do we respond to this? I can't just go, nuh-uh. That's not useful for anybody. It's just not useful. So if it's not nuh-uh, then what is it? Well, it's actually having a method for crafting a ritual. So we have all of the info on this side. This second quadrant, and this is kind of the process we talked through. The first quadrant is we need to actually analyze the current frame. What is the dominant narrative? Its linguistic patterns. How is it set up? Its media expression. How is it getting out there? Who is it getting to? How mainstream media is presenting it. How social media hashtags and trending phrases work. We went through, we did all this. We got the dominant framing. We got quotes from a whole bunch of different shit. We have an Among Us, apparently. Okay. Even Among Us, apparently. Which I'm sure happens. That's a real thing. Then we have all of these other little ways for us to sort of consider these things. Law firms, Spengler Nathanson, Ohio Solicitor General. There's some really weird ways that these things tie in on the First Liberty website. Attorney General sided with this guy, which is strange. But it's also turns out that maybe the district attorney, the Southern District of Ohio, the Attorney General of the United States, may have referred First Liberty to this guy, which is weird because this guy doesn't have those connect. Like a lot of little weird things we started finding in all the narratives. Then we go through and we did the stakeholders, finding financial ties where the nonprofit set up, did as best we could. I got completely cock-blocked when it came to like talking to the people actually in the county clerk at Bryant. They're very lovely. They just clearly aren't interested in random internet ass case anymore. I can't imagine why. So we've got kind of two steps, and I've been working on a little bit, so have other people. The big deal here is that from there, we need to devise out of this, to pull out of this, what is the universal values, the universalist message that is within this. From there, how do we take that universalist message and turn it into an actual framing, new frame construction? By doing this, we can start building a methodology where we can take any of these elements, any story that comes out, and slowly get a little bit faster and faster and faster, and pump out responses that are not simply, this is dumb, you dumb. But instead of that, actually stepping away and going, hey, we've got a little bit more, we've got a little bit extra. What is it we can actually do? If that makes sense. Hoping it does. Got to do announcements in the different discords, that's fine. Here. One. With this setup and the way that it's put together, the goal is for us to start parsing and going through these things and having these conversations, if that overall makes sense. Hoping it generally does. There you go. That's the very long version. There you go. So, for me, when we talk about this, because the reality of it is that these are the underneath saddest, most, and when I say pathetic, I mean in the terms of pathos, pathetic people in society. These are people that are turned away from other homeless shelters and drug rehab. These are people literally at the margins. Everyone, even a little bit, feels for that. There's a universal value of like the nature of people being left out or being refused. It's a big aspect of this. People who are unhoused, the people who are forgotten. What about the forgotten? Kind of the idea that is at the center of this. My audio's cutting in it. Oh my God. Oh wait, why is it so quiet? Sorry, why is it so quiet? Oh, my son was in here screaming into the microphone. Apologies. My microphone, I had it turned down because he was screeching into it. Which happens. What can I say? Screeching child. That's what do you expect? Let me see if let me get that going right. Let's see. Let's see. That's much better. Okay. Cut off for 2.5 seconds. Fuck me. All right. Well, let's see. let's see. Let's see what we got. This should be good. All right. Hopefully this doesn't do it as much, or if it does, I don't know what to do. I don't. We'll have to figure it out a little bit later. Is probably how that's going to go. I have a shitty noise gate on it. That would do it. Let's see. Let's turn you back on. Regate. There you are. Two seconds. Sorry, everyone. All right, I'm just going to cut audio out. Give me 2 seconds to... There. All right. So that should not do that shit again. No, it's not just you. Sorry. It's a very long story. My son likes to come in and sit in my chair. And while he's sitting in my chair, he likes to pretend he's me. He's 7, which means he has long enough arms to touch everything and delete settings. As you do. As you do. So, common ground is what's here. Ultimately, we want to talk about, and we're going to be talking about, yes, neglect and abuse is central to this. The idea of neglect, the idea of those who are forgotten is central. The fear and worries about insecurity and security. These are things that this story touches into. Plus, being a good person. Like, this is like good people doing good things shouldn't be punished. Is like, I see a lot of the YouTube comments that play with that. That thing, I think, is going to be where we find a lot of really interesting common ground. One of the things that is kind of a fun reality is there's 2 parts to sort of a very common experience when it comes to how people have dealt with codes. I'm going to talk generally here to kind of just get the thought out, but more I'm trying to make my way through thinking about it. We have building codes for very particular reasons. Some of them are more absurd than others, but very rarely. The vast majority are there because a city council decided we needed X, Y, or Z. Some of them are HOAs that require certain colors of the house. Shit like that, that's frustrating. But most building codes are like, oh, this gauge of wire for electrical because you're carrying this amount of current. Things like that we need. We don't want dirty power. We don't want shorts. We don't want wires heating up, which is a thing that happens when you use the incorrect gauge of wire or the incorrect outlet or do things that are not according to code. People who own a house get upset that they have to abide by code. This is why this story appeals very, very well to boomers and Republicans. These are people who own their own home. They don't like the idea that they have to do things according to code because it's their house. Fuck you. They're thinking of it in terms of their existence as right now, and their intention is to never sell the house or a thing they don't think about. Right? So you have that side of things. But then there's the reality of when someone buys a house or if someone is renting a house. Hello, how are you doing? I'm a renter. Most of us are. Code is necessary to make sure that you're not renting someone a death trap. The house I'm in, for example, the guy decided to do a whole bunch of shit under the table and nothing's according to code. So as I'm staying here and I find out that the upstairs bathroom, the upstairs bedroom, and my office are all on the same circuit and none of it is a GFI. None of it. That's a problem. When we see that the piping of the house isn't done to code, they're using the wrong thicknesses of pipes. They don't have an actual valve into the house. It's a pressure valve, not a turny-turny valve, which is what you're supposed to have. They hook up the hot water to both where the fridge's water is and also to the outdoor spigots. So I have hot water going out of those. The vents were redone in a way that is absolutely not all this shit. You don't notice it right away when you first move into a place, but at some point you fucking do. And at some point, the codes are the reason that you can say, hey, you can't do this. I need to have these things. Because I, as a human, have a right to a certain level of habitability. I have a general understanding of what my rights ought to be, and I need to be able to stay somewhere and live. That's a lot of people. These two sides of what I have to deal with when it comes to codes. There's two kinds of people. It's tough for me to vocalize, but it feels like at the base of that, the nature and response to bureaucracy as savior or as annoyance, those two things we need to find somewhere that they do come together. This is where my brain goes on that one, because that's a big deal to this. The second is that when someone is taking care of things, I'm taking care of a dog, I'm taking care of my son, I'm taking care of these homeless people who I've been charged with taking care of them. That thing, I feel like this becomes a major one. There's a phrase called duty of care. It's a legal term, but it's an important legal term. It means that if you are taking care of something, your job is to take care of it. That by putting yourself in a position of care, if I say, hey, I'll watch your dog for a day, don't worry about it. And it turns out I've not only never watched dogs, but I don't really care, and I leave it outside and it dies. I'm liable for that, and possibly criminally so, depending, because I put myself in that position. If I don't put myself in that position, I'm not responsible for your dog. Your dog dies, that's a problem. I didn't take your dog, I didn't offer it. When we have someone like our friend, the pastor, and he is claiming care, there's a problem, and this is, I think, I feel like there's a political message here that I think matches with a lot of frustration people have with just generally the world. By claiming, I'm going to take care of these homeless people, he thinks that's all it is just kind of like, hey, I'm going to do nice things for them. I'm going to make sure they have some food, blah, blah. He doesn't understand that duty of care, when you say you're going to take care of people, you have to take care of them entirely. Does that make sense as I'm saying it? What the fuck? I'm not sure if I think that it's worthy of that response, Power Sir One, but I understand. Philosophy Noir, stop deleting your shit. You're fine. You're funny. So these are two things I think I want to spend a little bit of time and sort of dive down and understand the separation of them and where they fit. Because we have basically in my mind, and this is where my brain goes just generally, I think. But we sit and we talk and we go, on the one side we have the bureaucracy, which is like the frustration, right? And then on the other side of the coin we have as how to put it, management of safety, like the baseline rules that the bureaucracy is really meant to be there to save. To say another way, when we have rules, because it turns out that if you lock a whole bunch of people in a building while they're sewing, and you don't give them a way to get out, and you lock them in so they can't go out for smoke breaks, and there is a fire because one of them decides to smoke and everyone inside dies, that thing, your job, the job of the building owner, the job of the person with the shop, is to maintain safety enough for those who are there. That thing that you're offering safety. You're offering assurances that there's some level of safety that's with that. That management of safety is a thing that I think is presumed to be in existence for everyone. It feels like it feels like that is a fairly universal thing. I've traveled the world. There is a presumption of safety. Oh, the person who made this wouldn't do a shitty cutthroat job and not give a fuck about me. That thing, despite the fact that if you're in, say, various places in China or Southeast Asia or in Eastern Bloc countries, and you go on a roller coaster, it's a different world if you didn't know how the regulations work for these things. But people would presume, hey, they wouldn't put it out here if you could die on it. Yeah, they would. Turns out they would, because they don't care. That's the thing that the rule is putting in place, that the bureaucracy is enforcing, is that the presumption is that you give a shit. And if you don't, we're demanding that you do. It's the enforcement of giving a shit. So we have that kind of setup, which annoys owners, but is boringly, like I use the word management important, boringly safe for everyone else. And I don't know how to phrase that thing at all. I really don't. But it feels like the other angle would be playing with the duty of care. Where if a pastor is going to say, I'm here to take care of the homeless, we're going to make sure you are. That we're not going to let you lie. Right? Power Circle 1, this is a part of the social contract. You assume these things will occur because the social contract implies they should do things right. Yes, it ties in with that. I think there is a presumption in society that people care about the thing. When you experience a thing, when you take in a thing, you care about it a lot. You usually do. You're like, oh, fuck. Oh, this soda looks great. This food looks good. You care about the thing you're eating. You're there. You're connecting with it. You're doing that. Your presumption is that everything involved with that food has the same level of care. And it doesn't. It doesn't. The nature of how things are produced is a great deal more terrifying, kind of across the board, because it's, spread across, it's done by a bunch of different people. There isn't one guy overseeing the whole thing. It's, lowest common denominator bidding. It's a million things. So even if our pastor has the best intentions, understanding what it means to take care of people, that is a step further. When we talk about, and it's a thing I think I see anti-natalists and natalists and everyone kind of hit in this really weird place. It's been a consistent thread that we should require licenses for parenting. As an example, that you shouldn't be able to just have a fuck ton of kids and then treat them like shit. Elon Musk has a great example of this. There's a lot of people kind of everywhere. And people get that feeling because it's something you can do. And you're then in charge of this person. That feels weird to us, that we just allow anyone to just create a person and then raise them and not give a shit about that process, when we do in so many other ways about a billion other things. There's something there politically, I think, that's getting at a deeper truth of why we work together as people. Kind of why we work together as people. And it's, bear with me. I'm sorry this is a bit rambly. I'm trying to make my way through this because I find this shit very, very, very frustrating, but very useful, because the conversations we're basically working through are pretty serious, and they're pretty hardcore. But let's talk about maybe one other thing that works, I think, pretty nicely. And that is the local versus the, sorry, I'm going to use it. The molar, the regime difference. The local as a thing, when I go to a restaurant, I'm eating at a restaurant local to myself. Everything is local to myself. Everything's local to you. Everything's local. Even if you're traveling somewhere that's local and it's local to you. It's an experience you have. The disconnect of that thing from everything else varies kind of based on how much the locality of interaction is around that thing. For example, my house that I'm renting. If someone who wasn't a shithead had been living here and not just renting it out as like some asshole sort of doing random stuff, if he lived here, if this was his house and it was the only house he had, and he decided, oh, I'm going to rent it, I'm going to go on a cruise for 2 years or some shit, the house would have been taken care of very differently because he was living in it. It was his home. But the moment it's an investment property, the moment it's not his per se, but instead property, then it shifts. It shifts from being the local thing that I don't care. No value is too much for my safety. Anything I can afford, oh God, that's too much. It becomes a different calculus than, what's the least I can spend? Because I don't care, because I don't give a shit. I'm not the one who's going to die in a fire. That thing that happens there. I go to a restaurant. If it's the owners are the people working in it, if it's their restaurant, you tend to have a very different experience than if it's a McDonald's or a Taco Bell or a chain that people work way downstream on. All these things sort of have a locality to them. This feels like it's where we're starting to have these conversations and where this sort of touches into. Because churches, places people gather, are in America especially, but I know it's global, but I mean American culture, especially in the Midwest, they are a core part of the culture of social spaces, period. I grew up in a place where one of the first things you'd be asked is what church you go to. That's just very normal. That thing that's happening, when we talk about this church, people are putting it in for theirs. They're taking this global thing, the global phenomenon, I'm trying not to use the words, but the full body of a church, pastor, homeless, unhoused, these symbols that are not local, and they're reapplying them to themselves. This is one of the challenges with the sort of way these things get framed and the brilliance with how they frame them. They take these global things and they crush them and shift them into symbols that anyone can apply to themselves. Everyone can feel for unhoused when I tell you that actually this is sexual assault, people on sex offender lists, and active heroin users that weren't allowed next door. That changes the conversation for a lot of people real quick. And also that he allows them to continue to do heroin and to do things, and that the women who stay there, he doesn't warn, by the way, we have a sex offender staying here. And women who are drug addicts stay in the same place as sex offenders. And I'm sure that's led to just the best things in the world. So when people talk about this thing, they're applying it locally, but the reality is it is a molar symbolic. I did not write that right. Symbolic relationship that they're placing with them. They're taking the symbols and applying to their space. That's how they're working. The way for us forward, in my mind, is to play with the same rules. When we talk about the local, when we talk about the symbols of it, when we readjust, when we set things in a new direction, this feels like there's something along the lines of a global message, or a message that I think can cut through. I may not have figured it out quite yet, but I feel like that's a methodology. For example, Trump and Zelensky. Trump and Zelensky have their tete-a-tete, and whatever happens, as it is. I'm not going to be able to convince anyone who's on Trump's side at this point what happened in that meeting. That's not really the thing. What they're doing is they're seeing the symbols of things, the threats of World War III, the president of America being disrespected, how you disrespected the White House, you disrespected symbols over and over and over. That's what the meeting really was about, is you're disrespectful, because you just want this war to end, blah, blah. That thing that they're doing, symbolism that anyone can place, fools a good number of people. It plays with that same sort of thing. But if we take it the local and we say, we play instead of symbolic, we play instead literally at the person, and we be hyper specific, where it's a country was invaded and we're demanding they give up all of their mineral rights to us, and we're not guaranteeing that they'll be safe. Don't even allow their version of it. Be hyper specific in that thing. Don't try to connect it to larger stories. Every time we do, they have an answer, because the symbolic larger story narrative plays into the reactionary mindset, plays into the essentialist mindset, plays into the fascizing mindset. So that shift, if we can make it, feels like would be an interesting process. Feels like it would be an interesting process, at least to me. Does anyone have another thing that they want to add in here? Other shared realities or shared experiences of all of it? Because I think there's anti-government sentiment. I do think there's a anti-government general sentiment that's part of it. There's the fear of, it plays into the persecution narrative, which a lot of religions now sort of require, which is depressing, to say the least. It's horrifying. But it's tough for me to say shared experience. I don't think, so let's go through this. Universal values, shared human experiences and core values. Document, express priorities, map emotional resonance, note cross-cultural constants, identify shared aspirations, track moral foundations. So the goal is to find common ground between opponents, if you can do it. So common ground for Chris and me. Let's say it was just Chris and me. Fuck the rest of these people. The common ground would be he sees his faith as being that of necessary proselytizing. He's got to do this. That's his deal. And he doesn't really give a shit if he runs a homeless shelter or not. He just wants to be open 24 hours because in his mind, anyone he saves, which is by teaching them the word of God, not by giving them healthy food, not by taking care of them, not by getting them medical care, not by getting them into rehab. If he saves them through Christianity, then he's saved them. That is how he's talked about it. That's what he has said outright. And that is what the people who have been saved by him say. They've never said, oh, we started in a program, blah, blah, blah. No, he introduced me to Christ. No, I mean, it's strange because it's because isn't both the persecution, but also the expectation of deference to power. I mean, these things kind of go together. It's, as Nietzsche talked about, the nature of resentment, which is really what a lot of religions take advantage of, is one's own impotence being turned into a pure quality, a goodness, an act that they can do that's good. So if I don't have power to do a huge amount, let's say, I'm just some fucking asshole. I'm not the president. I'm not a capitalist. I just can do only so many things. Over time, as I'm sort of stomped down, I fill with resentment. That resentment, a priest can easily turn into saying, look, that's a good thing that you suffer like this, because suffering is godly. And you understand that you should be standing before God, because if you continue to suffer like that by not exploiting power, by not taking on power for yourself, you're doing a good thing. You're deferring your power elsewhere. This goes with the other half, which is, do you see all those people who are not saved? You need to make them saved like you. And so spreading your impotence is actually what proselytizing is. That's what the evangelical religion is teaching others to be impotent too. Because it makes you feel better. That's it. I get it. I have a lot of, yeah. Am I tackling the entire phenomenon of the elephant, or a specific case with just this exercise? We're trying to tackle the entire thing. We're using it in this specific case because I want to go through the process and methodology of how we might respond more. The goal would be to then turn this into a process where we take news articles, take news things, do 1, 2, 3, 4, and shit out at a fucking response, and actually have like a little bit of force behind it that we can, have Twitter bots go scream at people about, that kind of thing, which I think would be fun. And I think as we go on more and more, I'm seeing good reasons for it, personally. Just myself, though. All right. Let's see. How does that apply to the Trump Vance Zelensky comms? Well, I mean, resentment doesn't. Again, they're going to be unique. But when we talk about them, we go through the same sort of process. We go, okay, so the first thing is the dominant framing. The dominant framing is that, in this case with this, Zelensky is dragging us into World War III, and he's utilizing the U.S. as a strong man in order to get more because he won't give up power. That's kind of the thing the right is saying. And it's working within their group, and it's spreading in more mainstream ways than I would have liked. When we go through the stakeholders and we look at it, we can clearly see that not only does Elon and Trump both have extensive interests with Russia. I'm not talking about Russiagate shit. I'm talking about financial, actual interests in Russia and a handful of other things, plus the need to be the strong man. And Zelensky works against this because he is democratically elected, despite them not having another set of elections. He is doing just fine. They're working through their things. Europe's backing him. The liberal order as a thing is backing Zelensky. Trump has to be diametrically opposed to this for a whole bunch of financial and power structure reasons. This setup, of course, puts us in a place where we talk about, well, what are the shared experiences and shared values? Well, the shared values for the Zelensky thing is self-defense. Like, it's actually the easiest thing that there is. For 15 years, for a decade now, they've had deal after deal after deal with Russia to not invade them, and they've continued to invade them. They've had hostage agreements, prisoner transfers. They don't care. Like, Russia has broken every single agreement, and because no one will do anything, they continue to do it. Because an agreement is nothing if there isn't force of law to back it up. The shared experience explicitly there is something everyone knows. If you don't have the power of something to back you up, you've got nothing. And that's literally all Zelensky was asking for. And that's why this turned so quickly on the Republicans, because it's a very easy thing. He just wants to make sure that he's got power behind him so we can get to peace. Because peace is nothing if you don't have the ability to stop the guy who's constantly invading. That's it. So you have this universal simplistic message. People didn't fall for the elephant in the same way, but some people did. But there's stories that do work, and they do burn through everything. Oh, look, Doge is finding so much bullshit in the government, and look at all this stuff of how it's spent here and there and there. These things are not, you can't go, well, I liked that stuff, because you kind of didn't, and they don't. So what's the argument? What is the thing you say? What is the response? How do you structure it so you're not just going, it's good? Because we can't. That's why this thing is a very good example for me, at least. I think it's a very good example. That's how I look at it. So we've been going over this. If you want to, you're free. Anyone's free to jump into this. I will reshare this board. Look at that. Rhizome team. Oh, wait, what the fuck? Who is the second person on my team? I need to figure out. Don't sign up for Miro via my team. It'll go. Don't do that. Just don't do that. It's just weird paperwork bullshit every single time. But I'm going to toss these into Discordy. If you want. It's in the Join Us Live, the QC stream section. I'll put it in the No Elephants Project link again. And you can just jump in anytime if you want to. Nice and easy. All right. Two seconds. Sorry about this. I'll be right back. Apologies. All right. Trying to make my way through this. Let's see what we can do. Other cultural narratives that are part of this is the ongoing, again, and I'm going to just say, this thing feels like it's becoming more and more central to most of the discussions people are having. The idea of what's happening at a large scale at the government or at the city or state level versus my life and what I've led as a person and the things I'm doing. This discrepancy, which is not nothing, that discrepancy, I think people are very, very sensitive to, but it's also being taken advantage of those who are aware of the discrepancy from the other side. The capitalists, those who are aware. So for example, the idea of backing a preacher who wants to care for the homeless, I would do that. That's it. Like that full stop, I like that idea as a thing. When we talk about a city, finding a guy for that, emotionally, that's what it's playing with, is that it's that. But the specific fact of the narrative being taken apart as it is, how it's being pulled, how it's being stretched, how it's not actually about the preacher at all, how it's about improvements to that space that the preacher is using, that's owned by someone else, that he's renting, he doesn't own. That thing, this is a bigger conversation. Does that make sense, how I'm saying that? How that makes sense? I feel like there's something there I'm going to have to do some more interesting work on, because it feels central. I don't know. It feels central. Here, I'm going to and hide other people's cursors in case they don't want me watching them or their name continuously on stream over and over and over. I'm going to actually say I don't think anti-government sentiment is at the core of this. It is really about the abuse, the forgotten, doing good things. This is kind of the... The false premises, I think we don't actually, that is part of it, but I don't think that's actually like part of the universal values at the core of it. I think it's a thing that people are frustrated by universally. But I'm hesitant to say it's that. I'm actually probably going to have to cut the stream a little short tonight. There's other shit going on, and I apologize. It's only an hour stream. There's a lot mentally for me to go through right now. Got other shit. Dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. Yeah, it's... I'm trying to figure out how I want to go about this, because we're on stream. I'm wanting to talk through this, but it's kind of like just deeply distracted by things. It's tough. Put it out of my head, I suppose. Well, if we assume bureaucracy is at fault, let's talk through actually the process of how this happened. Let's talk about bureaucracy. Okay. Bureaucracy, when we discuss it, especially colloquially when we talk about it, we're playing into a very specific space. That specific space is that of thoughtless stamping of forms, filling out of forms, moving of forms down the road, the DMV of things where you have in every movie, the woman or man is like, yeah, if you wanted that, you should have filled out form 722B. Like, we have that emotion around it. And it's that emotion around it. But these things, these rules aren't actually out of bureaucracy. They are bureaucracy. And there's a difference there. There's a difference there. If we have a set of rules that are about, for example, if you're going to have people sleeping somewhere, they have to have X, Y, and Z setups. People built that, and it wasn't bureaucratically built. It wasn't a series of forms that then went to a committee that went to another thing. People have fantasies about that. But most of these codes were put in place quite specifically and voted on and chosen. There's a process, but the bureaucratic process isn't really there, not as a thing. It's not the thing itself. It's the process around it. Very often, process around it. That difference, I think, is worth also going through. Yeah, actually, let me put that in there. Let's see how I might phrase that. Because there's a difference between the bureaucracy, it's heartless bureaucracy on one side, right? If that makes sense, it's heartless bureaucracy. Heartless bureaucracy. I'll never spell that correctly, I don't care. Versus people making laws. And it's one of those things that, thank you, Gage, I love you too. We were having a voice chat in the cathedral talking about capitalism and how corporations can deal with regulations. I thought this case is a good example. It is, because it's bureaucracy can deal with bureaucracy. Corporations have a bureaucracy literally built to match and mimic and play with and filter into the bureaucracy that exists in regulation of their own industry. When you're part of a games company, or when you're part of an entertainment company at all, you have lawyers designated for every part of the bureaucracy they need to be. There are people who specialize in licensing and copyright. There are people who specialize in contract work done by third parties. There's people specializing in manufacturing licenses and patent attorneys and all these things. That setup, I as a person don't have any of those. I don't think most of you probably do, unless you're deeply independently wealthy. You don't have your own bureaucracy. Companies have a bureaucracy. They do. And so they have that ability to set up and play with those things. People don't. But again, the heartlessness is not in the people. The heartlessness is in the bureaucracy. People make laws. People enforce laws. People work towards laws being enforced. People work to things being done. And the reason you're getting exactly at it, exactly, Parsec One, just for credit. There's an old OSHA saying that says every rule is written in blood, because it is. It's the old, why is that warning label there? Because someone made sure it needed to be there. And that thing is what happens. The reason people make laws, this whole ball of shit here, the reason we have bureaucracy is because there were needs that were developed, and we collectively work together as a thing to make this choice happen. If we go all the way back, let's bring in some anti-oedipus. Let's have some fun. Let's bring in some Wittfogel, because why the fuck wouldn't I want to bring in Oriental despotism and the nature of hydropower, or the power of water and the control of water, which is what Wittfogel believes is really what led to what we would call the first modern city-state of Ur. People have tribes. Great. They do all their things. They have their own little mini bureaucracy, but it's very, very quick. It's in the village. It's the hash marks of storing food here, or this is how these things are. There's general understanding of sort of debt relations. At some point, though, there's too much people and agriculture and clay making and stuff that needs water, and you don't have enough people going back and forth with big jugs of water to the river. This is how you spit big jugs of water on the head, or carrying on big buckets. You'd bring as much water as you could. That doesn't work after a certain point. There's enough people that you need more water than people can go get, or you start having really fucky problems. So people go, we could bring the water around. We could actually just like rebuild this. We can actually fuck with the ground. We could just recarve it. Remember, do you see Steve over there? He built a little trench, water went in it. We could do that for the whole village. We could do that for the city. We could do that for the 20,000 people. And when we do that, we agree to do that. it puts us in a weird spot because someone needs to manage that. A bureaucracy gets created. The bureaucracy is the structure of managing these things. And that setup put that person, that structure, in charge of who lives or who dies. Not directly. It's not what people did. They didn't go, oh my God, I would love it if Steve was in charge. You know what would be amazing too, is if he could stop people from having water and kill them. Or if he could play favorites. Can we do that? I really want a Steve that plays favorites with water. But that's what happens, because over time, as someone does things, they like or don't like or dislike or feel X, Y, and Z about things. And that changes. And when that changes, they ignore or respond snippy or do something drastic, whatever it may be, based on mood, because that person's in charge of things. And that's how management works. So we have this idea, and have had this idea, of this bureaucratic system that is heartless and cold because it is the necessary structure, but it's born of people wanting something, or the decision being made that that would happen. No one just made an aqueduct. Like, it's not how these things come about and work. No one just makes this shit. No one just made a city and city codes. People were together and they're like, hey, we should start a city. They created a city. They had a city council. They entertained. This happens everywhere. Now, capital sells this, switches this around, shifts it, billions of things. Still people doing this. That's how these city codes came to be. And then at some point we had too many people for city codes, state codes, and national codes. And groups of people in the large bureaucracy that I'm now distant from, I now don't even see as human. That's that. So we have a heartless bureaucracy, but we have people making laws that have reasons. I made the comment the first time that the reason we have fire codes, I can show you a video and you will care about fire codes. There's a lot of videos like that, actually. Early days of the internet were very different than they are now. Very, very different. Rotten.com, man. I don't miss it. I don't know how I'm nostalgic for such a nightmare, but you see things that make you go, oh, that's why we have the rules. And there's a reason. So we have the rules. They were made by people for reasons. But now those people are not really the ones enforcing them. They're not really involved. In fact, I don't even know any of their names. What I do know is the mayor and the city council enforce these rules that they stepped into. They may not even know why they're there. So why should I care? Fuck these rules. Fuck fire codes. Fuck city codes. Fuck building codes. Why do I have to do any of that shit? I shouldn't have to do any of it. And that's kind of, to me, this feels like the back and forth at the heart of it. The heartless bureaucracy is the global. The people making the laws, this is, again, the local. This is, I keep coming back to this sort of interplay between how the bureaucracy is formed, which tends to be quite emergent, even though it's definitely fucked with by, social order and power structures and all that. But it's people doing things that they believe in some capacity. My dad, let's talk about my dad. My father, Randy, he was a realtor where I grew up. Where I grew up is southern Jefferson County, Colorado, Littleton. There's a thing called bentonite. It's a special type of clay. And bentonite is, when I say special, I mean like special in all the ways that can mean. Because when bentonite gets wet, it actually expands. And when it rains heavily, it expands. But it doesn't shrink. Not really. So it expands slightly, changes its superstructure, and then continues to expand. Now, this thing, when they started building in this area, King Carroll Valley, that's where I went to elementary school, Schaefer Elementary School. All of this, this was just filled with bentonite, was everywhere. And you could see our school broke in half. Like there were entire like major roads, 40, 45 mile per hour roads that were like this. It's crazy. It still is. Houses cracking in half. They literally had to pick up houses and move them before they cracked in half, because they didn't have bentonite in the city codes. And they didn't want to change it for developers. Developers fought adding in rules about disclosure of bentonite, rules about bentonite, how to build on it, because you can prevent it. You can actually dig it out. You can do things. But they got rid of that. You know, my dad is Randy from Colorado. Yes, I know. And yeah, I think a lot of people from Colorado identify too much with any of the South Park kids. But I mean, if like they went to fucking Heritage High School just like a couple of years ahead of me, and I went to Heritage's prom, actually just like 3 years after they graduated. Like their cultural experience is not far from mine. I know Alfred Packer Grill at CU Boulder. I have all these things. That's not anymore. They're wealthy. I am not. So they win, I guess. That's how that works. But my dad would go and he'd say, you need to make this rule. You need to change the rules. And they didn't. They refused to. This setup cost fortunes for people. There's an immense amount of damage and problems. This is how these rules get made or not made. They're created in that same process. But then they take on the life of their own. There's a really interesting concept in anti-oedipus, and it's one that I think a lot of people mistake. They talk about anti-production. Now, anti-production is not like antimatter. I've even described it as that, and I've been mistaken when I've done it. So don't necessarily always listen to me. Do your own work. But that setup, when we're playing like, when we have production happening, we have a business happening, we have anything being produced, anti-production is the element that is produced for the maintenance of said system. The maintenance of the bureaucracy requires work in and of itself. And it doesn't just require a small amount of energy. It's not like, okay, cool, that's great, thanks, Steve. It's you have actually a huge amount of internal psychic energy and external productive energy in order to keep things up. Think of it as Marx would talk about it, as the maintenance of the factory. That there is a cost to maintaining factories. That's how it is. There's a cost to maintaining your employees. There's a cost to maintaining everything. The entire superstructure that exists has a process of maintenance that's necessary. This is the thing that takes care of the bureaucracy. That cost is silly. And it's also dangerous because it puts us in a place where we're now disconnected from production. And we don't feel it the same way. We don't feel productive. We don't feel like we're building. We feel like we're maintaining, and maintaining feels shitty. So you have the same problem once again. Everyone, same exact problem. So I love that elephant emoji. Thank you. I may actually try to save that. So when we're talking about people building the narrative for these things, and they do very often, and you see this, this is a big narrative for the Trumps and the Elons, and even actually with the Zelensky thing, it's talking through what it means to maintain the system and how awful that feels to people to maintain the system. And it does. It's the maintenance of bureaucracy that people don't like. I do need an elephant emoji. I'm going to actually... Let's do this right. Not Google-o. Thank you. I'm going to get one elephant. There's one elephant I'm thinking of first. I feel like that's probably going to be the best bet for my elephant. Delirium Tremens is an excellent, excellent beer, by the way. That's the elephant YouTube uses as default. I still want my own. I think Delirium Tremens' elephant is perfect. Do I want one that's super, super pink is going to be my question, though. Not sure. Yeah, I feel like that would be good. All right, I'm going to put this in. We're going to pop one of those. I'm going to get it up, and we'll get it going in the next day or so. I'll pop that together. That'll be easy. Universal values are tough to work through. Deal with it. Like this just takes time. You're free to literally tell me where it's not, but I think I think the best opportunity here is to really dive into the thing that I get, and I get it. I look at the Department of Education. I look at city bylaws and codes. And if I'm not able to, because of ignorance, understand literally why a thing was made or what it supports, it's next to impossible for me to give a shit about it. I don't know why anyone would ever be invested in a thing they don't immediately understand. If you don't sit in a place, where you understand this, what is that thing? What is that thing we can do to make people understand why it should matter and why code matters? Because bureaucracy is shit. It sucks. Bureaucracy sucks. It is a stable hierarchy hegemon that we spend an extraordinary amount of time and money maintaining, and all it does for us at best is fine us and put us in trouble. It's the Chief Wiggum line. I thought you said you couldn't help me. I can't help you, but it can hurt you. It's a great line. Accurate. Police do not help you. They hurt you. That's the nature of bureaucracy. It's not really there to help. It's there as outward rules. Because again, that's how it's written from the beginning. That's the nature of law. It's the nature of law. It's not there to help you. It's there to hurt. It's there to punish. It's there to place barriers and control. Because we necessitate in different ways. It keeps just wanting to focus on Oogie Boogie. Wonder why. Did I have that in the wrong place? Nope. It's having it focus in my head and it's not doing it. That's okay. That's my Oogie Boogie. Law is powerless to help you, not powerless to hurt you. So that thing feels like the first thing that people are reacting to. And I see this across the board, like Enjad. Yeah, it's, you see it in other countries. People do not like bureaucracy. People aren't invested in it. But again, when it's a very small town and everyone knows each other, they don't dislike bureaucracy. They dislike the people. They dislike what the people are doing. They're more sort of married to an understanding of what actually that bureaucracy does versus it just as a bureaucracy from afar, because it's the only image we can sort of have of it. It's kind of fascinating. And bureaucracy itself is one of those things that, really, it's the thing keeping democracy standing. It's the way we have and we agree to do things together. That's it. Like I don't want to say base social contract shit, but it's because social contract, I think it goes far beyond that. I think the basis of having a social system at all is like, if we're going to be together and we're going to do stuff, we agree at large to do things together. And there's no single person or whatever. And again, how we determine that. So it's tough. Yeah, people see problems like this, immediately jump to the idea that it's silly. It reminds me of the old Ron White story about Texas giving automatic death penalties for murder if there are 3 witnesses. There's a lot of very good bits on sort of that setup. It's the bureaucracy of the guy who, 3 strikes and you're out, and he decides he doesn't have any desire to be out in the cold, so he just happily goes and does things to be locked away, even though they're minor. People know the stories. They know playing the system, living in the system, reacting to the system. But the system itself, again, the bureaucracy, there's I don't know if there's a way for us to get away from that. Bureaucracy being felt as a negative. I think that's the general social investment of bureaucracy, is that it's a negative. I'm trying to think of a film. I'm trying to think of an entertainment property that envisioned it as anything else. Bureaucracy is the bad. Right? I think so. I think that's it. Bureaucracy is the bad. Alexa, stop. Goddamn fucking thing. In theory, Amazon's got their new AI assistant, Super Alexa, or some shit coming. Alexa, do not answer that. Alexa, stop. God damn it. Yeah, it's bureaucracies feel faceless. I agree with that. It's bureaucracies aren't alive. They aren't a human. They aren't humans choosing things. They're necessitating. They're almost like logic pathways on their own. Like, I want to say like an AI mentality where it's thing, then this, then this, then this. And it's an automated system. You can beg with it, but no one cares because it's bureaucracy. There's no, the freedom a person has is out. You don't have it internally or externally. Yeah, there are comedies where bureaucratic skill is used as heroism as a joke. I don't like, it's meant to be as a joke, as like sending up the idea. And the reason it's funny is that bureaucracies are terrible. Futurama is like the best example of this, because all those dumbass fucking Redditors who love Futurama because technically correct, the best kind of correct. When that's a comedy line that's meant to be making fun of people who believe that, it's not agreeing with that at all in any way. That technically correct is the best kind of correct. It's not. It's a silly, weird way to think of things. Again, all of it is making fun of the bureaucracy. And David Graeber's bullshit jobs, filling bureaucracies, filling outside of that, because we don't need X, Y, and Z. It's, Sorry to bother you. Sorry to bother you is very much about the heartlessness of the bureaucracy. I'm trying to think where the bureaucracy is a good thing. Is it that we naturally have a negative investment in bureaucracy? Parks and Rec frames it kinder, yes, but also that the bureaucracy is literally the bad guy throughout the entire series, that the people in it aren't. Actually, that might be an interest. Again, but it's getting back to the same thing. The structure is shit. The people who work in it hate the structure. They hate all that stuff. They hate what they like, all the bullshit. They love each other. They're good people. We identify with them. People like them, like whatever. But it's the bureaucracy is still the evil thing. The bureaucracy is not seen as, hey, it's a good thing we have this rule in place or we all would have died. Like, I'm just in my head, I'm thinking of horror movies where you're trapped in an elevator. Oh God. Oh wait, look, there was an inspection exactly a month ago. We're fine. Like, this doesn't happen because it's boring and lifeless and external to us. And it doesn't hit us imminently. It doesn't touch our souls. Actually, Vogan's and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy could be an interesting version of this. That's an interesting idea and direction for it. Because I think they are, well, they're at best neutral. I'm trying to figure out if they're anything but, because the way that they're phrased and the way they're handled in the book, it's the same thing. Yeah, Ms. Dixon, people are embedded in the structure, but we don't act as such. See ourselves as just passing through it with no ability to influence it. Spoken like someone who's worked in a bureaucracy. Even people who are idealistic who get into it. you hit that point where you're like, oh, I have to be powerful to make changes here. And then by the time you do, you realize that no one really has the ability to change anything that much. But then so then the problem is the bureaucracy is the bad guy. If bureaucracy is the bad guy, then there's nothing we can shift the investment towards or aim it at. That's the challenge. There's nothing to re-aim it at because the bureaucracy is bad. Like I'm trying to think of anyone who would disagree with that, and I can't think of a reason to disagree with that. So if that's the case, that's one of our universal things, is that bureaucracy bad, which is a simple one. That's actually pretty simple. Bureaucracy bad. So, but then the question would be, how do we sidestep? Because the way that it's framed, again, the framing we have up here, the dominant framing, we have pastor has to pay money, his flocks suffer. The government authority versus individual freedom. The bureaucrats are transgressing the right to religious freedoms, are transgressing the right to free association. There are many dictators enacting personal vendettas. They're invaders. This is the language that's being used. That we almost come out the other side, right? So as we're talking, because bureaucracy is a faceless sort of empty husk of a process. They've actually, when I say they, I don't mean the Jews. I mean the right-wing nutcases have weaponized bureaucracy as an active force. I haven't talked about it as an active force because it's not, and we wouldn't. That's the reason we can't identify with it. Interesting. So the reason people can't identify with bureaucracy is because it's not an active force. It's a sort of sunken process behind the scenes that doesn't have, life within it. It's not filled with vitality. However, those who have weaponized it have claimed that it has vitality and that it's aimed at you. That is interesting. Because I can't think of anyone who's ever said anything. I know bureaucracy and people playing at the idea that the bureaucratic system has its own life. There's the Matrix, obviously. But you can kind of see this in a whole bunch of different things from, HAL in 2001, all the way through to iRobot, or all the way through to name a fucking thing where the machine comes alive and the bureaucracy is out to get us. Conspiracy movies, whatever it is. New Mission Impossible is this. The weaponization of bureaucracy as a vital force against life. But it's not. It's just neutral. If it's anything, it's a sucking out of life, but it's not weaponized directionally. Yeah, when we talk about lawyer or cop dramas, every single one of them, and we can go through, I sadly have really overindulged a whole lot of cop dramas and shit, but they all come back to the same thing, that the system is the problem. The people in it are the good thing. The system is the problem. So Law and Order, which is like one of the classics, because it pretends it's playing middle of the road. It's total propaganda, but it plays middle of the road. It's not like The Shield, which ostensibly, I think The Shield does really interesting stuff with it generally, in a very interesting way. But Law and Order tries to play with like, no, cops are good guys. They're all good guys. They're all trying. But they're all trying in a system that is working against them constantly. Oh, I can't believe I have to get this warrant. The bureaucracy is terrible. Oh, I have to talk to this judge. The bureaucracy is terrible. Oh, I have to get this. The bureaucracy is terrible. It's the whole thing is bitching about how the bureaucracy is working against them or holding them back from justice. Bureaucracy is in the way. the stumbling blocks of bureaucracy. It's throughout the entire series. The Shield, I think, goes about it in a far more interesting way, where the stumbling blocks are still there, but they're much more explicit about cops crossing the line and what that means, and all the different ways and the kind of the lived realities. I think The Shield is exceptional, by the way. I do think it's an exceptional show. But that setup of what The Shield's doing, I think, touches into this, because they talk about and they play in, The Wire does this too, by the way, I think really well. They talk about the realities of the politics behind zoning rules. Both shows are about zoning laws. If you didn't know, The Shield and The Wire are both about zoning laws, ultimately. And so they're not bitching at the system. You could claim there are moments when that's the case, but I don't see it as that. They're claiming, and they bitch at specific people, specific companies, specific situations, the corruption of the system, maybe, but they're bitching about specific people within it rather than the system overall, which is interesting. Both those shows ostensibly play to a different audience than the Law and Orders, the NYPD Blues, the LA Law, if you want to go way back, or all the way to, I mean, more recent, silly, dumb shit. What's her name? From a High Potential. Fun little show. Great. But these things sort of across the board, they play in that same stuff. It's really weird. I find this fascinating. This is a very fascinating specific thing. So when we talk about and we play specifically around, and I think it's worthwhile, they're weaponizing and talking about how the bureaucracy is aimed, that people have aimed it, or that it is actively a bureaucracy trying to stop religious practice. The government's war on Christmas as a very good encapsulation of this. There's no war on Christmas. There's no rules. There's no specific people. They can't point to anything because bureaucracy doesn't have a vitalistic element like that. It's just kind of just a series of basic laws. The closest they get is that there's a war on Christmas because this small town decided to pull the 10 Commandments out, or that they decided they wouldn't do a Christmas tree this year because they have a large Muslim community now. Shit like that is a war on Christmas. Re-shifting and playing with bureaucracy. But they're the people behind bureaucracy. That feels like there's something. I feel like I'm hitting something. Does anyone have any good books on the nature of bureaucracy that's in a good critical frame? I'd love recommendations. I'd love recommendations. Because it's, aside from like the traditionals, I'd like to play with something a little bit more modern. Because like obviously like Graeber and all of that, or Foucault, Weber, yes, I'm less interested in that kind of shit. I'm something that is not about the place bureaucracy holds, but instead the weaponization of it or how it's used. Because I think what we're seeing in this plays into a few other things that we're touching. Because the universal reality, if I'm going to just go back to it real quick, is bureaucracy is bad. That's the thing. But what it is and how it works and how it's set up is a nebulous concept. It's a symbolic relationship. It's representational. Bureaucracy isn't a thing. Bureaucracy isn't bad in that sense. It's hurting us. It's out to get people. But we all dislike it. We have an aversion to it, which is interesting. So then the question would be, do we sidestep? Because the sidestep's actually not a super difficult one. It's one that I think has been successful before, which is instead of saying no, bureaucracy is good, which I don't think lands with anybody. You're free to disagree with me on that if you want to have that. I would love to have a discussion with someone who thinks bureaucracy is like outright good. I think at best it's neutral. It's fascinating. It's actually, yeah, Ms. Dixter, I think I, you, we, them. Yeah. Well, it's a banality of evil kind of mentality, right? Is that kind of the thing we're touching into then? Because again, the bureaucracy isn't the thing. But it seems central. Change the framer to the pastor and company taking advantage of bureaucracy instead of bureaucracy being out to get them. I'm with you, Sure Shot, and I think that's the direction I'm kind of heading, which is I think bureaucracy is the central element here. And I think it's the core thing that we're able to, one, turn on. And I think it's easy for us to make a pivot on top of that versus a lot of other things. But I think it's also, it's a great place for us to offer alternatives. Like, one of the ways that you can get, I'm going to talk about sortition. How are you guys doing? I'm going to talk about sortition for a moment. Are you guys familiar with sortition? I'm hoping so, because sortition's really fucking fascinating. The core idea of sortition is that a random group of people make choices for all of us. I mean, that's the basic thing. Democracy, as we talk about democracy in general, is not necessarily about one person, one vote. That's a manifestation of democracy. The question of democracy is where the power sits. That's what the question of like cracy is. Blank cracy, theocracy, monocracy, monarchy, democracy, whatever it may be. That's the thing, is where does power sit? Where's the seat of power? And it's in the people. Democracy is about it being in the people. There's a billion ways to set up what that means. Sortition is how we do juries. We go, hey, actually, you know, the reality is having just hard laws that are yes or no is not going to work for crimes, because there's a lot of nuance and reality to people's lives, especially locally to where people live. And so at the national level, we can have a crime that says, do not kill people. And it's a federal crime. There you go. But when someone kills someone, there's a lot of questions of like, well, what the fuck? Just saying, oh, you did kill someone. Excellent. Put them to death. That's how the law would work if we didn't have jury trials. Jury trials exist because we go, well, there's a lot of nuance and we need people to be judging things. We have a judge to judge whether or not something's legal and allowed or permitted, but we need juries to determine if someone's guilty. And those juries are random. That's the whole point. Random selection of your peers. That's why juries are chosen, because the nuances of people on the ground is actually that unique. That's why when you have a jury trial anywhere in America, they're not going to fly people in from Bangladesh. It's your peers. They're not going to fly people in from another state. They're going to have local people, your peers. Why do I care about this? Because one of the challenges of democracy is understanding how power gets put into place and how it consolidates. Having republicanism, which is the voting kind of we have, where it's representational democracy. I vote for a congressional member and they serve 4 years. The voting for, not a big fan of. I've never been a fan of this because people vote for a lot of different reasons, but also they vote for something at a distance. You don't vote for something locally. You don't vote for something that you care about. Sortition grabs random people and says, hey, luck of the draw, but these are the people who are going to decide your fate. And that's the setup. Sortition, because of its randomness, because no one can know what's going to happen, it changes how structure is maintained between elements. So, one of the things, and I've talked about this before, one of the things I generally advocate for is that we kind of I advocate for a slight change in the way we're set up. We have people who make laws, but ultimately we have a sortition council that chooses what laws actually get implemented, or if they're being broken, or if they're being done, all of these fun things. The way sortition operates is incredibly powerful. I've been rereading, and I recommend Terry Bourricius' book on selection. See the S? It's a wonderful piece on sortition. And it is about the democratic alternative. When we talk to people and we talk about bureaucracy, we need to offer an alternative. We need to offer a secondary thing. We need to be able to say, hey, that's not great. We don't like bureaucracy either. We're not here to defend bureaucracy. It's one of the challenges we have right now with what's happening with Elon Musk, because I'm not a big fan of USAID, as I've said multiple times in the program, but also, like, there is literally good things that are happening that now people are going to die. And also having one person just randomly do shit by their own whims, that's not democracy. The power is not seated with the people. He's doing whatever he wants. No one voted for him to shut down USAID. That was not on the ballot. That's not how this thing works. But that's how representational democracy has been contorted, perverted, and mutated. Sortition shifts that. That's why I talk about it. So when we talk about how do we respond to these right-wingers? How do we respond to people here saying, hey, don't you hate fucking bureaucracy? That the city council is going to find this preacher. And you go, I'm okay with that. It doesn't land well. Flipping it, turning it a bit, and changing the framing to that. Well, actually, you think this is anti-bureaucracy? No, he's taking advantage of the bureaucracy of the courts. He wants to save money and allow people to possibly burn to death in a homeless shelter. Put them on the side of bureaucracy. Flip it. Oh, then fuck, what else do we do? And then you have another discussion. That kind of thing shifts the conversation, shifts the thing that we play with. That's the idea. Well, he's actually on the side of bureaucracy. Look at these guys. Who has the army of lawyers? The homeless people? No. The homeless people? No. The city council doesn't even have armies of lawyers. They don't. But the developers do, and they're trying to make sure that they don't have to worry about people burning to death. They're trying to change what's happening in the bureaucracy so that way people can burn to death. That's the turn, the universal turn. So it's bureaucracy bad is the shared experience, I think, at the core of it. Because we have a lot of stuff here, but I'm moving these around, but there's not really a lot of rhyme or reason, but you'll kind of, as I'm doing it, I'm just talking. Because I think insecurities with this also, I think desire for relevance is part of it. We've got a few of these. I think this stuff that I've kind of scribbled in here, I think there's room for us to have this convo in general. Let me lock this thing. Lock you. Excellent. Because I think this setup where we talk about duty of care, bureaucracy bad. I think duty of care is another thing that is a universal message. People being cared of, people being taken care of, wanting to give a shit about people, all that good stuff. I think the heartless bureaucracy shit is really good. I think this actually becomes pretty powerful pretty fast, actually. I'm fascinated by this. I think these are the core things. I think this is the core shared experience elements. I really do. Because I think it's ultimately a play on bureaucracy as being evil, combined with the nature of duty of care, that is part of the story. It's those two things, that duty, which is part of bureaucratic sort of things, the duty of care, with the bureaucracy not taking care. It's actually putting people in harm. The bureaucracy needs to be there. It's Social Security is incredibly popular with people as a thing. Social Security is a bureaucracy, but it's a bureaucracy that does one fucking thing, and that is take in money and give it out to people who need it, and everyone actually at some point. That thing that Social Security does, extremely popular. When I say extremely popular, I mean like incredibly popular here in the States, which for a social system is, I know, depressing, but hey, I take what we can get here in the States. That I think becomes the thread. I think that becomes the thread. I really do. The presumption of bureaucracy in the setup. All right, so then the reframing. I've added a bunch of stuff back in here, and I think we're going to move some stuff around just in general. One sec, I need to lock that in place. All right. I like a lot of these thoughts. Well, the Christ is a pot. I like a lot of the thoughts that were in here, by the way. I like a lot of the thoughts that are in here. Dad's place is a shelter and a human kennel. I think we're actually going to save the thinking around that. What the fuck? Why are you moving? I just literally locked you, you stupid thing. There. Yeah, still locked. Good. I think the criminal is going to be part of this, but I think we'll come to that. So when we reframe, when we talk about reframing, universal human rights, no one cares about, Anjad. I hate to say that. No one cares. Because again, I should re-say that. The concept of universal human rights, people don't care about because it isn't local to them. They see it as a far-off concept that is abstracted to everyone. Universal human rights is for everyone, right? But if I can't afford food, I don't care. Like, it's really, people in the Congo don't spend their days wringing their hands over universal human rights often, unless they're there because they're helping universal human rights happen. So it's tough when you're talking to a person. And that's the thing to remember across all this, is the goal for this is to write in a way that we're talking to the person. We're not talking to a talking head. We're not talking to a media organization. We're not talking to a NGO or governmental group. We're talking to a person. And that's how framing works. That's why it works when they do it this way, because they're not talking to me when they say the government's trying to shut down a Christian church. They're not talking to me, but they're talking to me when they say a homeless shelter is being fined by a government for being open. Holy shit. Are you kidding me? In this economy? That gets me, because they're speaking to me, right? That's the fun part. So what kind of person are we talking to? Well, the goal is to talk to the most average person that there is, which makes it sort of seem like I'm being contradictory. But it's to try to talk. That's why we care about the universal values. It's not independence. It's not anyone. I think you do this right. I think you can speak to people who were on the right. I think you can speak to a lot of people. When you say something like I have a bot Twitter account that's really, really right wing, because I find things fascinating. And I have a Facebook account that's right wing because I find things fascinating. I don't post quite often in them, but I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups that are. And I made a comment in one of them that, because they were like, fuck Zelensky, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it's shame he doesn't treat Netanyahu like this. And they fucking lost their minds agreeing with me. There's the threads of stuff, depending on how you say it, is really fascinating. And when we talk about the universalist element, I knew what I would say because they're all fucking anti-Semitic racist pieces of shit. So of course they're going to agree with that point. So it's kind of funny for me. But the underlying sort of thing, when we talk about like, what is this universal message? it's a thing that, one, can become mimetic because people are invested in it. They're not rationally going to agree. That's not where we're at. We're not trying to create a rational organization of what people can do. We just want someone to go, oh yeah, that's it. If we can do that, it's a fucking win really, really fast. And the more that we can develop how we do this, how you respond, how we sidestep and return to these same things and make that, the more we're going to be able to actually affect a conversation, honestly. It doesn't take a lot. Doesn't take a lot to do this. It just takes a lot of thinking and work. That's the fun part. That's what we're doing here in theory. At least that's what I claim and what we believe, and who knows. So we'll figure it out. So, I wanted to add some things in here. I want to get everyone's thoughts on it. So you tell me at any point if you're like, no. One of the things I've noticed working really well is the first thing, starting with people, especially the average person kind of thing, is accepting confusion. Admitting confusion. Admitting that things are confusing. That seems like a way in that is deeply universal. They're making this more confusing than it needs to be. That type of language works extremely well because everything's confusing. Everything's confusing. I feel like that's a really great reframing device. I think going through and restating primary players, and we're going to go through this. This is kind of how you do reframing. I'm rephrasing a thing, but I think that being the second thing, like if there's an order of operations where it's like, for confusing. Here's the thing though, like I'm just going to do this now on the fly. It may be terrible, but I'm just generally like, it's confusing when the way they're setting all this stuff up is so fucking confusing. Like, okay, look, the bureaucracy is evil, but this guy's got a team of lawyers that are from another state that like go place to place and try to sue. That sounds, that's what the fuck. And he's trying to get it so they don't have to put in fire hazards. That seems weird. Why is that the bureaucracy he cares about? Just put in fucking fire spring, like some kind of reframing, restating them as that, where it's like, yeah, the city council, they've worked with him for 2 years. Like this isn't some crazy bureaucracy from another state like his lawyers are. Right? Like that's probably like the kind of package we want to talk about. That's kind of the packaging where it's like, this judge worked with him for 1.5 years. He knew him by name. This isn't like some faceless bureaucracy like a bunch of lawyers out of Texas who decide to fly across the country and spend $15 to $20 million litigating this case over and over and over. In the name of, and on the lawsuit, it ain't even the fucking pastor. It's the building developer. It's an LLC. This is where bureaucracy is. This is bureaucracy being weaponized against the homeless. That's it. Reframing, restating the primary players. They're mad about what? That's the kind of built into that. And then the calling back to relevant horror. I think playing into, this is what, why we have these rules, right? I can send you a video. Would you like to watch the video of the people stuck on top of each other because there weren't enough exits in the building that caught on fire? I've seen it. It haunted me my entire life. I think of it now and it makes my brain want to stop working. Callback. And then hyperlocal contextualization. What do you want lawyers from Texas coming to your town and telling them what laws they can or can't do? Then appealing to the despotic, defining it. Look, I get it. We want this setup. We want, to care about people. Go do it then. But this shit from another state or the federal government coming in to define things, it's a bunch of shit. No, the average person doesn't care about the homeless. They care about the homeless insofar as they have an emotional investment to it, but there's a difference. It's an important distinction when we talk about investment versus care, because everyone will say they care about the homeless because it's like, this isn't 1985 anymore where it's like cool to be fucking greedy and heartless, where it's like, I don't care about the homeless. I'm cool. I'm going to get laid and do some coke tonight on Wall Street. Like, that's not a thing. It's not a thing. That's not a thing. But if you're like, hey, do you care about, yeah, I care about the homeless. Do you want them to die? No. Like, it's the thing. Do they care enough to, hey, you want to join me? I'm going to go work at a soup kitchen. Maybe. I'll let you know. I might have stuff to do tomorrow. What's that? My phone's ringing. Gotta go. I'm going in a tunnel. Maybe my signal is, yep. Bye. They care. But no. But are they invested? Absolutely. Everyone is. Because that's a person. And they get it, and they worry, fear, death, the death drive, the death of capitalism, sadness, all of that stuff. So it's that thing. Nestle says they care about the homeless in the sense they want them to not ruin their good view. But this is, again, if you're around really rich people who act like this and who talk like this, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they do care. Their investments are speaking through them. Caring is something that a person does after the fact. Throw that idea out. That's not a thing. You're socially pressured to do certain things. You care about a thing because you're socially pressured. That's not where we're actually at. That's not what we're actually doing. What we actually are is, as a thing, invested in various social positions and elements socially. We're invested in our place, our time, where we consider ourselves, how we consider ourselves, whatever it may be, and the things around us. People, if you go, I saw a homeless man the other day. Most people don't go, ew, as much as it may be funny on a comedy when that happens. Most people go, oh God, where? There's a big encampment of them. I saw him the other day. Are they saying it in terms of disgust? Maybe a little. Are they saying it in terms of care? Yeah, like worry, nervousness, anxiety, all of these things are part of it. When you ask, do you care? They're going to say yes. It's a useless conversation. The important thing is that they are emotionally invested in the concept of homelessness, which everyone is. And yes, Olivia, exactly. First Liberty is themselves a bureaucratic think tank who's part of a larger bureaucratic think tank, who's part of a national and international ring of bureaucratic think tanks who want to reorganize government, set up and demand and tell you what you should be doing. When the reality is you can go talk to your city council person. They live down the street. My mayor, his son's name is Brooks. That's a thing. I know because I met him. It was weird because he was calling his son and I turned around because that's not a thing that happens to me. People, if your name's Chris, you're bored with it. If your name's Brooks and you hear someone calling your name, you always turn around, period. But I got to meet him. I got to know him. You can do that because it's not bureaucracy. It's the actual people in your life politically. That difference. That's the place I think where we have room to have the discussion. To me. Hayden is another name like that. Hayden is another name. There are a handful. Not a lot of Brookses. The town I grew up in, Littleton, Colorado, the guy who owned the local Papa Murphy's, that managed the franchise, his name is Brooks Brown. That been my name. So that was weird. It's weird. They exist, but it's rare. More my point. You went to school with Brooks. He bought you cigarettes. That may have been me because I bought a lot of people cigarettes. Underneath it, when we're talking about this though, they're using the faceless bureaucracy to attack, but they are part of the faceless bureaucracy. So what they're doing is they're narrativizing that. If we can redefine the despotic, where the power is coming from as not necessarily the bureaucracy, but as them, and as that they're the bureaucracy and that the small town is not, changes the conversation. And I think this can be done across the board, even with federal orgs like USAID and others. USAID puts money into NGOs. USAID did not give money to random people to do, for example, Sesame Street in Iraq. Gave it to PBS and the Henson Company, Jim Henson's company. Jim Henson's company cares about kids. They do. They're amazing. Actually, they've done a lot of work. They have a lot of business people there. They have their own, but they're people who wanted to do this because kids need Sesame Street. What, you don't think kids need Sesame Street? We killed all their parents. Can we at least give them a little Sesame Street? Fuck off. Like, these conversations shift where bureaucracy is, or where the onus of that is, I think, as a big deal. Nestlig says, you say being openly anti-homeless is not popular, but how do you explain hostile architecture? Oh, I don't think that's openly anti-homeless. That's the thing. It's anti-homeless conceptually, right? So, I mean, that's how it's designed. Anti-homeless architecture would be if someone decided to lay down and then it cut them in half and killed them, or that shocked them or whatever. But instead it makes things uncomfortable or difficult to lay down, difficult to sit. And again, the way you tackle that is through the same thing. You don't go, don't you care about the homeless? People do care about the homeless, but they care about themselves more because they're invested in things. So when you say, do you care about the homeless? Yes. Are you invested in the homeless? Yeah, they're invested in the homeless, but they're also invested in investments and money and work and themselves and what they're doing. All of this is important. This is the big deal, is making that switch to how their investments are actually playing out and what you can say to those people. That's the big deal. That's the difference. So again, here, making that shift where we define the despotic, where we play into that last little bit where we say, this is actually them trying to tell this tiny town, this bureaucratic, weird nightmare of lawyers, trying to tell a small town who's just trying to get by. These are $50,000 a year people who decided to run for city council. She's been on city council once, and she's a fucking waitress or some shit. Like, give them human backgrounds, because the lawyers don't have human backgrounds. They're lawyers. They're not human, right? They're bureaucrats. Then you can shift that. That's the setup. That's how I'm thinking about this. So when you talk about reframing, all of these things start playing in, where it's like, Dad's place is a shelter. No. We reframe it. Human kennel. Great phrasing. Whoever did this, by the way, that's like fucking beautiful. Because this is the mentality where it's like, look, we want shelters. Sure. It's not a shelter. It's a kennel. And it actually has less safety than kennels are required to have in that city. Because people don't want homeless people burning alive. Do you want them burning alive? Changes the conversation. That's it. That's it. And then, again, as you go into it, where is the onus? Where is the bureaucracy? Because this is a series of lawyers coming into a small town to defend a multi-city, statewide contractor and realty like real estate portfolio. There's no people being defended except for the pastor, who's actually not party to the lawsuit. That's how you switch it around. SureShot puts it best. It's best to avoid emotional blackmail, incredulity about something people already believe they care about. It's because they do care. But that's, again, what does it mean to care about something? Like, for example, do I care about Palestine? Yeah, I fucking really care. I've cried about it. I've been incredibly sad about stories I've read. What have I done about it? I've called Congress people. How much do I care? Do I care as much as others? I watched kids half my age put their bodies on the line and lives on the line to protest. I ain't done that. So I guess I don't care. It's that kind of thing. It's like, oh God. Ugh. If the Kindle's point doesn't bother them, perhaps we've branched off this process flow that hits an end bubble. Well, I think these are good ways to reframe as you go, because I think they're downstream. Because I think the opening thing, and I'm going to try to figure out how to make this into a little bit more of a direct automated sort of methodology around things. But like that setup, Hey, look, this shit's confusing. I would agree. It's incredible how confusing this shit gets. Restate the primary players. Here, we have ostensibly this fucking pastor who cares. Don't try to say he doesn't. Don't try to call people liars. Never. That's not what we do. That's not the direction we want to go. The pastor just wants to take care of homeless people. Did you know he's not even party to this? Like, he's actually not the one in trouble. It's the real estate portfolio that he's renting from is the one who's actually being fined, and that the lawyers were called in to defend from Texas. So like, people are mad about the bureaucracy locally, but that's not it. These are local rules. This local pastor, he knows these people by name. They're neighbors. Brian's a small town. That thing is the shift. And I think from there, figuring out how to, it's like spider web out to as you need. Wait, there's a real homeless shelter next door? Phenomenal. Like, having talking points that are these things. The human kennel line, as an example, nobody's affected, but none are saved, is so... There's a really interesting... I would love to know exactly what the person thought, but where this makes my mind go is... let's just give the pastor that his world is true. Like, I don't care about arguing these things with him. If he's not able to proselytize, people will not be saved. Just give it to him. Say that's where his social investments are. If nobody's affected by this, nobody's saved. Nobody's affected, nobody's saved. There's a really interesting sort of back and forth of, why isn't his landlord taking care of this? Why isn't the real estate company, LLC, that he's renting from, doing this? Why are they putting him at the center of this, enforcing this big bureaucratic nightmare so he can continue saving people and doing the work that he believes in? I don't agree with his work, but that's not my place. But the city's not in his way. The real estate, faceless real estate bureaucracy is, and the lawyers from across the country are, and the weird legal superstructure that exists where the Attorney General of Ohio brought in these fucking lawyers from from an entire other section of the country. This is the bullshit. That's where my brain goes with that one. And I love it too. Because this is the idea. This is how Lakoff, I rewrote a lot of it, but it's center focus. What is our centering focus? Strategically reframing it. How are we using language? What is the architecture of our language? And again, it's not questioning people. What do they care about? Or calling them on bullshit. We're not calling people out. We're not writing that way. We're calling out the narrative's bullshit and flipping it. We need to develop new metaphors. We're doing good there. Creating inclusive terminology. Again, not shitting on these people. Build positive associations with things. Establish agency patterns. Agentic patterns. The letting people make themselves and make their futures. Having agency within it. Structure cause and effect relationships so that they deliver in a different direction, because that's what they're playing with. Even if you don't believe in cause and effect, and I fucking don't, this is about building a narrative that responds differently and pushes people in a new way. Giving pathways to solutions, which we did. Make alternatives viable. That's a fun one as a thing. Establishing natural next steps. Well, what we need to do then is we need to actually, I think we should probably be demanding that his landlord, this rental company, that owns this land, make these changes, because clearly what they're trying to do here is get it so Chris, this fucking poor pastor, is able to do this and have these people. Then what happens? They kick him out and they turn it into what, a flop house? Is that what we want? No, because then they have a flop house that isn't doing good work because Chris is just renting it. Like, that's how you turn. This is how you turn it. This is how you turn it. And then you build this, and we need to start documenting success patterns, seeing how it spreads, seeing how we get it out there. There's a process here. We need to build an implementation strategy. This is going to be a nightmare in and of itself, to say the least. This whole part is just going to be a lot, because there's actual work that needs to go into how we do it. And it also makes sense to point out the government offered to just fix it. Yeah. The city council agreed that hey, they want more help with homelessness, they were going to give him a grant to do it. It's not a big deal. But the landlord, again, the landlord refused. The landlord refused. Now suddenly we've changed the entirety of the discussion. Right? The whole thing. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's a thing that the hard right or the capitalist won't be invested in, but we don't care about them. It's the thing that average people who see it on Twitter or elsewhere will spread. Because, yeah, it appeals to a common sense. Right? Or even a good sense, you might say. Yeah, that's fun. Yes, but the government is bad. Yeah. Switching it to the landlord and saying the government's bad. You can do that. Because if you change where the bureaucracy is, because that's the thing, where are we centering bureaucracy? That's really what we're talking about here, is we're talking about changing the center of the bureaucracy. Okay? In their messaging, the center of the bureaucracy is the government. Right? And they're centering it in the archaic, weird, convoluted nature of codes. Building codes, fire codes, citations, rules, civic stress, blah, 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 all this stuff. And the Kafkaesque reality of them. Kafka fucking hated it too. I hate it too. So they're centering it there. If we move it, we can move it easily. Like the city council's working with him. There are people in these positions. They're humans doing this. And they're not following some weird book of rules. They've offered to fix it. They've extended this over a course of a year, and they shouldn't have even given him the thing in the first place, but they also really like the work he's doing. They're supporting him. He even says that they've been supporting him. You can find this. You can find this. Chris Avell says this, but the lawyers don't, and the landlord doesn't, and the landlord's the one who's really on the ticket here. He's the one being sued. It's not Chris Avell and Dad's place. It's the fucking lawyer. The whole thing is this weird bait and switch of a bureaucracy of lawyers and business owners and corporate structures trying to supplant everyone else, including this poor pastor and all the people on the city council who are doing good work. Pastor Chris is actually not a client of First Liberty. Fun story. All of the paperwork, the lawsuits and everything that First Liberty has put in, Chris Avell is not on it. It's not a party. He is absolutely taking up the call. And there are other things that we can go into there when it comes to who he's connected to and how. But he isn't really the thing. And so we can very much talk about yeah, exactly, Olivia. The local bureaucracy has an open door. We can name people. We can talk about why they're doing X, Y, and Z. We can talk about what they've offered. We can point to it in time and say, look, they're doing stuff. They're responsive. They're not just disappearing into a thing. The black box bureaucracy, have we heard at all from his landlord who's responsible for the building and who should be doing these repairs and is the one actually being fined? No? You'd think that the corporate bureaucracy would be more responsive if it wasn't the problem. Shifting the language. Shifting the language. Shifting the language. And we're past the point of this boon of tyrants, but it is very cynical. It's extremely cynical, but we live in an age of cynicism. Like we do. So the response needs to be at some level cynical, but authentic. And in my mind, this is how we get to that. Because I generally, Chris Avell accepted my Facebook friend request. Hey, he's a lovely guy. He's kind of a dumb fucking happy dude. And he cares about people, and he's got, obviously clearly trauma in his past, and he's doing whatever he can in order to get the word out, because he genuinely believes people will burn in the lake of fire if they don't hear about the gift of God and accept it, which is horrifying as an existence. But hey, people put themselves wherever they put themselves. These are people. Talking about the people. The lawyers for First Liberty, it's First Liberty. We don't give a fuck about none of those lawyers are like individually working. They are part of the bureaucracy. the landlord, the the corporation that owns this place, that is working inside of lobbying, that was able to get in contact with the Attorney General of the United States, the Southern District of Ohio, which is not an easy task. It's not an easy task. Happened to be a Trumper when this started, so shock, who brought in lawyers from Texas. That's bureaucracy. Definitionally, that's bureaucracy. The small town doesn't have bureaucracy to that level. And I think this gives us that way where we're stepping outside. The framing particularly is, for me, taking the local and critiquing the symbolic, the representational, the gregarious, the laws of large numbers. If we critique those and we place instead that element of the vital, the human, the individual, the molecular, I mean, you might see why I lean this way, but those are the types of language pathways I think give us really, really good. It's really good language that I think does connect. Interesting. But with that, I'm going to take time on rewriting this. I want to try to turn it into a thing. And then I want to spend another stream, probably maybe tomorrow night, maybe Monday. I want to go through and actually see if we can apply it to stories and see if we can build a methodology that then I can, ideally for me, I want to turn this into a machine learning tool that will take in stories, will do its own sort of background. We dump in a bunch of articles, it'll pull out everything and it will rewrite it and lay things out for us. I really do think that would be really great. Also, the building company invoked FL. What? Wait, what? Oh, First Liberty. Well, so, okay. We don't know exactly how everything happened. This was a fucking deep dive, weird rabbit hole set. So somehow First Liberty found out about this case. How? We have a first person witness to it, which is that the business that Chris Avell has scrubbed from his past, which is saveyourchurchmoney.com. I want to say that's its name. It's, yes, saveyourchurchmoney.com. It doesn't mean saving your church money. It means saving your church money on furniture. He ostensibly built the website for this and is part owner in some way, some founder. He's put on his Facebook profile multiple times that he is a co-founder of this company, which has made very good money. The other guy, the actual owner of this company, saveyourchurchmoney.com and a few other companies, posted a blog, which we have saved, where he says explicitly that the Attorney General of the United States referred First Liberty to Chris. That's his wording. I'll tell you about it in a second, Hunter. We'll get to that because I want to simplify for the most part. But this is all of this fun nightmare of shit. So here's Chris Avell. Before his religious conversion, Avell was self-proclaimed atheist, worked in web marketing and development. He co-founded SaveYourChurchMoney.com. That's this, which happened to be at the same time. He put out, as part of a Rotary Club charity auction, website design certificate for $1,200. Build a custom website for their business because he was a web designer. He did that. Lo and behold, after this went for sale, and this was sold at this silent auction for Rotary, 3 months later, this website for SaveYourChurchMoney.com. And this is the blog post that was posted a couple years ago. Then the city of Bryan's actions came across the radar of the United States Department of Justice, who then contacted First Liberty, a nonprofit religious liberty law firm, to contact Pastor Chris. There's nowhere else is this written anywhere ever in anything in any capacity that we could find. So here's, if you don't know, Department of Justice isn't like one dude or one office. Department of Justice has tons of offices. There's Department of Justice districts in every state. There's lots of it. Eastern, Western, Southern districts. There's some Southern District of New York is kind of a big deal. The SDNY is a huge deal in the circuit of things, especially with Trump and everything out of New York recently. That setup that's necessary, that thing, the Southern District is actually in the area. This guy who's the Trumper, Justin Herdman, the American lawyer, served as United States Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, from 2017 to 2021. And he was a partner in the investigations of white collar defense practice group at Jones Day, a judge advocate, and ultimately this thing was written by this guy who complains in this video about the nature of fire code for churches, which is, I found really weird that he's doing that. All of these people are connected via spider webs, and it's not even red string, it's white string. It's like straight up connected to connected. So this is, to me, this is where we start talking about, when we talk about bureaucracy, the city's actions came across the radar of the U.S. Department of Justice, who contacted First Liberty, a Texas law firm, to come in and do shit. And it just happened to be people that are all connected into this weird fucking church group in Bryan, which is wild shit to me. Fucking wild shit. The reason I think it would be useful to turn this into some type of machine learning AI is because, one, the vast majority of this is actually going to be repeated writing, taking out things, finding characters, choosing them in a very particular mindset. Those things being digested and then spit out for us automatically, incredibly useful. It's incredibly useful, especially when you start talking about dumping in, 1,000 web pages and having something go through them for you. Oh, where are the connections? Where are things mentioned? How many times? Where's this set up? All that stuff we had to do. This is not going to be doable because every one of these stories, this is one story. It's taken us time, a lot of it, a lot of time. And there's been a lot of these stories. Now, we're not going to be able to respond to all of them, but I'd like to be able to respond to one more often than once every 2 months. So anything that speeds that up, and if we can make things automated, I'm a big fan of, because efficiency is going to be the name of this game for us to have that conversation. It's just going to be necessary. And then I don't need to be, because I won't be writing all of these. I do extremely well when it comes to talking. I can bullshit real fast. I can turn some stuff. I can turn a phrase. I can make something sound smart. I can string together words very quickly. But I can't do it all the time. And I'm not the only person. And I can't be doing this all the time. None of us can. The more that we're able to go, oh, here's a story. Look, all the pieces came out. This makes sense. Get on it. We can do it. Oh, it's going to make everyone's lives a little bit easier and actually give us a process we can actually run through. Yeah. I mean, the methodology has got to be built. Methodology's got to be built. That's the big deal. Whew. It's a lot. But I think the best bet is what I said. So let's get it out and then finish up the stream for today. I get that the story is quite confusing, almost by design. I get it. The worst part of it is that they are acting like the city is a bureaucracy, when really it's the swarm of lawyers and corporations that are making this happen. No, don't be sorry you kept me on later. It says, this is the stuff I would, if I was off stream, I'd probably be sitting and like trying to think about this. I can't get this shit out of my brain. That how things are worded is so fucking important. let's do some memory lane. How are you guys doing? So I've been doing media work for most of my life at this point because I'm an old person. Post Columbine massacre, I did a lot of television, a lot. And I didn't know that I was doing media training, but I effectively was. I was learning how to consolidate what I was saying. I was learning how to voice, because I learned early on that when someone asks you a question, if you answer completely, none of that airs. You become the cutting room floor, covered in your face in various poses of saying various letters, because no one gives a shit. If you aren't punchy, if you aren't responding quickly, you're out. And this is true of everything, all the way to live TV. If you're not there, you're gone. So when you spend your time, and I spent a decade in media in various ways. I was on Oprah, Donahue, probably 1,000, 2,000 hours of television. Probably a lot more, actually. And then I ended up getting into games journalism and then working in marketing and game development. And in game development, I ended up doing a lot of media training because I was a spokesperson. I talk well. I'm tall and excitable, and I can sell. And so I would be the one at E3 doing demos. If you haven't been to E3, and no one will again, you have people doing demos of games and talking through them. I was that guy. And the number one thing they would always teach you is the same exact thing I'd already learned. Quick and punchy. You have to hit it. You have to quit it. You have to be in there and quick. You do the thing. If you're not, you fail. And so every game, every marketing thing, every time that you've ever seen anyone meaningfully enter out into the media sphere, they have talking points. And if they don't, they're going to fail. That's just how that goes. Talking points come across the board. The Republicans have been probably the better at the entire thing in politics, but everyone does it. You have talking points. You share things. You have 10 or 12 things that are bullet points that you're going to be able to hit on. If it's a marketing thing, when I used to do this for Starbreeze. I used to get up on stage and do big presentations at Acer's New York Summit and all this shit when we were doing when you do these things, when you do talks, you have to nail it and you have to have the wording very specific. And the wording you practice. Why do you practice it? Because you need to. You need to know what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, because tight and particular and crafted wording gets through to people, said confidently. Joe Rogan, of all people, used to do a absolutely stunning comedy routine about how that the only thing that matters is that a monkey speaks confidently and we follow him. He used to be a comedian. I know it's been a very long time. He was not really much of one ever, but at least he used to sort of be one. That's far more real than you understand. They've done studies on this. People who say the exact same thing, but if I do it I think the story's confusing. And they might have done that by design. I get it. But if you do that, it doesn't matter how right you are. No one gives a fuck about what you're about to say. But if instead you come in and go, hey, look, I get it. That story's completely confusing. It's fucking silly the way that they go about it. Lawyers, corporations, they come right in. They take that shit right over. Confidence, steady pacing, and going. With the right messaging, you win. That's why it's necessary. People in the left, in my experience, have the problem that I used to have, which is you think that if you practice, that it's not from your heart. You think that if you do a thing cynically, that it's no longer from your soul, that it's not part of you. If you don't practice, if you don't communicate, no one will care, is the reality. I know, Ms. Dixer, I know. But it's the reality. It's just, this is how people are. And do we want to win or do we want to lose? And the reality is, to me, I want to embrace parts of all of this. I want to embrace parts of the cynicism. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's all good. I think there are parts of all of these things that we can take or leave, and we need to figure out what those things are and what tools we have. And a tool we absolutely have, and it's a big one, is that our position is universal. Our position cares about people in general. If we don't come at it from the position of fuck that pastor, fuck that shit, fuck Christians, if we don't come at it from that position and we're coming at it for everyone, what's the best outcome? The best outcome is these fucking lawyers are fucking with all of us. So is the landowners. They're doing all of this bureaucratic bullshit in order to sort of chase down this thing when all Chris wants to do is take care of the homeless, and all the city wants is another person who's willing to do this and take in the worst of the worst. They want to support that. Why are people getting in the way of that? And it's not the city that's doing that, but the city being claimed as that by people who have money and power. That is a universal message. That drives people in better directions. That is something people can care about. That's where we win. That's why the left will, if you do this, win. That's what matters. That's how you win. If you aren't coming at it with resentment, if you're coming at it with a truly universal perspective that's about the emancipation of everybody, and that includes capitalists, by the way. If you really want to figure that out, you'll come out in a different place. That's our job. It needs to be, yes, Ms. Dixon, we are a landing pad for everybody. Everybody. That's it. And that's how we win. They're a landing pad for people's rage, but not for people. They don't want to be a landing pad for fucking anybody except for the wealthy. Period. That's it. Elon Musk destroying the Department of Education. Ready for radical shit? I am not necessarily against getting rid of the Department of Education. There are knock-on effects that I don't want of it. What is the bureaucracy of the Department of Education? It is standardized, horrifying nightmares that have been placed upon people, and a single central place for the entirety of America to be lobbied for shitty teaching methods. Shitty textbook companies that are able to break our country into two places because the only states that really matter are California and Texas. If you didn't know, by the way, those two states set the entirety of how textbooks are written, because if they don't buy your textbooks and you're one of the three companies that sells textbooks, then you go out of business. That's it. So this weird, hyper-national, gigantic, bureaucratic nightmare that we live in is fucking every kid on the ground who just wants to learn, and people who just want to learn, and pushing us into a place where people are going to use credits in order to go to fucking shitty secondary schools that can throw kids out at a whim, when instead of 100% public schooling, locally funded, fine, federally funded, fine, but with local setups and local pushes, and I believe there's a path forward for all of that. There's a different way to have these conversations instead of saying no, or yeah, I also hate fucking so it doesn't matter. Hunter, if you are a public high school student, I'm going to time you out for that last comment. If you work in a public high school, I will not. Hunter writes, as someone in public high school, all the bureaucracy has just gotten so much worse every single year. If you are like a senior in high school and you're saying this, I'm going to have to time you out as much as I love you, because I feel like I'm just going to beat my head into a wall if I don't. It's true. The bureaucracy overall has gotten significantly worse, and it's at every level, but it's, again, because of these national things that they come up with standards, they come up with setups. I've railed against the hunt and pick method of the way that reading is taught. There are scientific studies on all of these things. I speak better than I write, for sure. Yeah, you have no idea how accurate that is. I'm going to end up, I'm writing a thing down. I'm going to end up rewriting it later. Especially because I'm tired, and I got burned out a little bit today. I had a stressful online interaction with a friend that I thought was funny, and I didn't realize they didn't think was funny, and it went bad, which is on me. That's I don't take things seriously, and I don't realize when other people are often, because if it's pop culture related, I literally do not take it seriously at all. like in any capacity at all, especially if it's related to Star Wars. And that's not fair to people I'm doing it with, because I act like I am taking it seriously because I find it funny, and that's my fault. And that's not a thing I should do. So, yeah. So my brain's a little fried and off in a side direction. It's what I get. But the thing at the center is that the bureaucracy is corporatism, federalism, corporatism, statism, corporatism, state bureaucracy. This is actually the enemy. This is what fascism is. Benito Mussolini, who created fascism, defined it as such. We don't need anything else. Like, the rest of it is fascising or other stuff. Like that kind of thing. I don't, we know what it is. So how do we reframe? How do we set it up in a way where we can talk about the universal reality of the kids that are in schools right now, the actual teachers that are in schools right now, and not think of or be scared of all of these other bullshit things? This is the language. So with that, please join the Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. And if you haven't been in it recently, there is underneath the QC stream, there is No Elephants Project. It's okay if you got added to my team. I have to remove everyone. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It happens. It's one of the, Miro has this thing. I pay for a small subscription. It's the cheapest one they have, because then I can have unlimited guests. But it always fucks with that, because they are always trying to upsell and screw every person who uses it, because they're pieces of shit. And you have the ability to check, join the team, even if you don't have an email that matches mine. And even if I've never allowed you in, and it's like, cool. Hey, Brooks, we've added Steven blah, blah, blah to your team. That'll be an extra $12 a month. And you're like, wait, what? Who? And then you have to go in and find where to cancel them. And it's just, you can't just say, no, don't add anyone, because they just want to make sure that they just want to ruin everyone's day is pretty much as far as I know. So yeah. With that, I'm going to bounce. It's been 2.5. Please join Discord, discord.gg/DGQC, the No Elephants Project. We are trying to figure out how to turn this into something a little bit more. My next project after this, because I'm building Twitter bots that are working quite nicely, and X bots and all that fun stuff. The goal is to figure out if we can push out a handful of, I think, quick, easy responses and stories that can be on, ostensibly on news sites that we may have developed and filled in with all of our own stuff, that can be on Substacks, that can be anywhere, content. What is the content farm preparation thing that's able to flood the zone with shit in response with a particular message? That's the next thing I want to work on. Until then, thank all of you for joining. If you want to support me, a super chat here, always lovely. Membership, always great. All that fun stuff. But Patreon's the best. Patreon.com/DGQC, or join the Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. Tuesday, we have Anti-Oedipus, of course. This next weekend, I'm excited to have Eldoran back around, and we may be doing a conversation around another version of translation of Hermes 2 from Michel Serres. If you missed our last one, the new one's coming, and it's so much better. I like the first one, don't get me wrong, but I'm really, really happy with what this one has turned out to be. So it's really great. We're going to be having all those conversations. Please stay tuned, and we'll talk, I guess, then.